Life started when you hatched out of an egg on a coral reef, and as you took your first gulps of water, you were carried out on the ocean currents into the deep blue sea.
Expressive, fair enough. Also, nice touch here. He's moved into darkness at the side of the stage because he's now in the deep blue sea. Clever. He has got to the space early. He's walked around that stage. He's done his pre-flight checklists. And he has decided, oh, if I stand here, I could be in the sea, and then the coral reef could be over there. And in a second, he'll point over to the coral reef. The coral reef doesn't exist there, but somehow in our minds, it kind of does.
You grew up here for a few weeks, and now you're big and strong, and at the size of a mighty tic-tac.
Brings the tic-tac. Nice touch. Why tell someone something when you can actually show them it?
You're ready to come back to a coral reef and take on the world, but how are you going to get there?
How are you going to get there? He poses a question. Questions encourage your audience to imagine an answer, or it might make them more curious about what that answer actually is.
Because this isn't Finding Nemo. The friendly sea turtles aren't going to point you in the right direction.
Finding Nemo. This is a good one. This is a cultural touch point. Now, what he's doing is, when he comes out on stage, there's his world that we're not part of. There is our world that he's not part of. And he mentions Finding Nemo to try and bridge that gap. He's mentioning something that I may have heard of. And I have. I've seen Finding Nemo. Later on, he'll mention Sound of Music. And these are cultural touch points. It's about trying to say our worlds are not as far apart as you think. He's going to mention things that we are familiar with. It's like imagine you're watching a really long presentation and someone mentions your hometown. You're like, it's me. You're somehow more connected to them because all of a sudden they're mentioning something that you are deeply familiar with. This is his exact ploy. He's going to talk about biodiversity in coral reefs. That's something people might not be familiar with, but Finding Nemo is.
This is the real world, and you are a very small fish in a very big ocean.
Don't throw things at your audience. I wouldn't be doing that.
You can't see a reef. They're too far away.
See?
You can't smell a reef. The current's going in the wrong direction.
Smell.
But you can hear a reef. They're really
Hear.
noisy places. Turtles crunch.
So what he's doing there is he's trying to, remember he said immerse yourself, so he's trying to plunge into the Pacific Ocean. Now he's talking about seeing, hearing, smelling. He's trying to make this a sensory experience. Clever.
Shrimp snap their claws. Fish whoop and grunt and chatter and buzz. Julie Andrews should have had a snorkel, because the reefs are alive with the sound of music. Sound travels
Second
far
cultural touch point.
underwater, and so you can hear your way home. Or can you?
Or can you? Question. Another question. We had that before. Now this also is an interesting point because it marks the end of phase 1. This talk has 3 distinct phases. Phase 1, quirky, light-hearted, sound of music, Finding Nemo, make them care, make them care, make them care. Phase 2, the thing that you care about is under threat. I'm sad, you're sad, we're all sad. This takes us into phase 2, brings the tone down.
I'm a marine biologist. I study the sound of Australia's Great Barrier Reef using underwater microphones, and my most recent recordings reduced me to tears.
Oh, emotion. Now, I rolled my eyes at this, I did, because I didn't feel he had actually cried over his data. However, I do encourage researchers to use emotion in their presenting every single time. Now, you don't work on baby animals, I get that. You might think it's difficult to use emotion. It's not. You just use emotive words. You are human. You have emotions associated with your work. Tell me about them. I want you to tell me about the most frustrating day you ever had in the lab. I want you to tell me about the most exciting discovery that you ever made. These things will pass on. To give you an example, I have lots of shows that I tour around with, and one show is on imaging. And at one point, I show a thermal image. And I used to say, next I'm going to show you a thermal image of someone holding a scorpion. I changed the way I introduced that slide a couple of months into the tour. I didn't change the image. All I changed was the way I introduced it. And I said, instead of just saying, here's a thermal image, I would say, next, I'm going to show you one of my favourite images of all time. And it blows my mind every single time I see it. Here it is. And you know what would happen if I did that? Every single time, without fail, the audience would go, a little gasp. Now if I just said, here's a thermal image, flatline response, nothing. If I said, here's one of my favourite images of all time, it blows my mind every single time I see it. I bring it up on stage and they go, every single time, passing on emotion to the audience.
In the last 5 years, climate change has decimated my reefs. Cyclones have smashed them to pieces. Marine heat waves have cooked the corals. The animals of that underwater orchestra are dead, and their once joyful chorus is a quarter of its previous volume. The symphony of the sea is being silenced. You can't hear your way home anymore. You're lost in the blue.
So he slows things down, using silence to make his point. He also uses alliteration, cooked the corals, symphony of the sea being silenced, giving us sound bites that are easy to remember. And I'm only going to play a couple more seconds of this, because we've reached the end of phase 2. Remember phase 1 was quirky, light-hearted, Finding Nemo, Sound of Music,